All right, thanks for tuning in to the channel today. I'm going to be reading Thomas Bradwardine de Causa Dei. This has never been translated into English before, at least not full scale, so Lord willing, I'm going to try to do that. It is around 900 pages, so it's going to take quite a long time to do this. This is the preface of De Causa Dei, and if you know nothing about Thomas Bradwardine and why I'm doing this, he was an English cleric. He was a scholar. He wrote philosophical, mathematic, theological works. He was born in the year 1300. He died in 1349. I believe he died of Black Death or the plague after becoming Archbishop of Canterbury. But he was Augustinian in his theology, and this work is the cause of God against Pelagius and the virtue of causes here, contra Pelagium et de virtue causarium. So we're going to try to just, go through this, and just to give you an idea, you have this beautiful artwork. I think this is the 1618 edition, and just kind of opens up with these words: Magnorum et multorum petitionibus atque repetitionibus cumulas incessantur solicitor atque nuper de causa Dei contra Pelagium et de virtute causarium in contras scholastis militinato. Anyways, it goes on in Latin there, and I'm not going to read this all in Latin. I'm going to kind of read you sort of my paraphrased translation of this. The way I've kind of done this is, one, learning a little bit of Latin, obviously, two, using a translation from German to kind of compare my work versus the German translation, which is actually very helpful because the German translation is a little bit more fluid, I would say, and the kind of word for word or phrase by phrase Latin translation can be a little bit clunky, and it doesn't flow as well. And then using those two together, kind of coming to a middle ground and sort of paraphrasing it, for lack of a better word. Not an extreme paraphrase. This is not the like message version of the scriptures, or in the New Living Translation. This would be more like NIV level of paraphrase, if you kind of understand where I'm going with that. So still going to get the underlying message of what Bradwardine is saying here, but going to be very much easier to read and kind of understand. So with that said, I'm going to go through the whole preface in today's video. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see some more stuff from the Middle Ages, some theologians from the, this is going to be the 14th century here, being born in the 1300s and dying in 1349. There were still some good theological works being produced then, and obviously we're not going to agree with everything Thomas Bradwardine says, but if you'd like to see some more stuff from the medieval times, and especially Augustinianism as it continued through the Middle Ages prior to the Reformation, if you like that kind of content, comment below and I'll produce more of it. With all that said, now we'll begin Thomas Bradwardine de Causa Dei. He begins, I am continually pressed and wearied by many earnest petitions and repeated urgings. These requests call upon me to set down in enduring writing what I previously spoke only in passing within the scholastic arena, namely my discourse on the cause of God against Pelagius, and in my treatment of the power and operation of causes, while I am still bound, as it were, in the service of writing. Next sentence here. Yet I am urged on all sides. On the one hand, the friends of God stir me up and encourage me to take up the defense of God's cause. On the other hand, and in far greater number, the friends of Pelagius call me back and restrain me from doing so. Indeed, and I speak this with sorrow of heart, as once in the days of the prophets there stood against the one prophet of God 850 prophets of Baal, to whom the people clung in great multitude. So it is even now in this present dispute. How many, O Lord, contend today on behalf of Pelagius, for the sake of free will, against your freely given grace, and against Paul, the champion of spiritual grace? How many even now despise your gratuitous grace, and are provoked, almost as if by indignation, that free will alone should suffice for salvation? And this one here I'm not going to continually scroll through the whole document, but you get an idea. If you want to follow along in Latin, you can go to this preface here on Google Books, and beautiful script there, beautiful Latin script. You can kind of follow along there, but I'm not going to try to scroll through the whole document. Just to kind of give you an idea, I'll just kind of read from my notes over here in the translation. So he says, these people think that free will alone should suffice for salvation, or if they do speak of grace, or even insist that it is necessary, then they nevertheless so exalt the power of free will that grace itself seems not to be freely given at all, but rather something earned or even purchased. How many are there, Almighty God, who, though powerless in themselves, yet presuming upon their own supposed strength of will, refuse your cooperative aid in their actions, saying with the wicked, depart from us. How many more, O Lord, exalt the liberty of their will, and thereby flee from the true service of God? And even if some confess with their lips that you cooperate with them, yet they remain among those proud citizens who once refused to have you reign over them. Indeed, more arrogant than Lucifer, they are not content to be under you, but presume to reign over you, King of kings. For they do not hesitate to describe human will and common action as if it were the mistress and commander, while your will is made subordinate as though a servant. They make themselves rulers and you a follower. They place themselves as kings and you a subject. Moreover, they ascribe to their own will in contingent matters such autonomy and freedom that they seek to exempt it from your governance, contrary to prophetic testimony, and even attempt to overthrow your most free, omnipotent, and immutable will, as though it were subject to necessity, whereas it is they who should be subject to it. O Lord, my God, I cannot but groan when I consider how many chosen judges labored to absolve and reconcile the Pelagians, who were once condemned and cast out by the judgment of the whole church. How many swollen advocates plead their case? How many distorted and unreliable defenses are brought forward on their behalf? And how many lacking sound arguments resort instead to clamor, seeking to advance the Pelagian cause through ridicule, accusations, mockery, and gesture, while suppressing your truth with noise and scorn? And how vast is the multitude who follow them? It seems as though the whole world has gone after Pelagius into error. Arise, therefore, O Lord, judge your own cause, strengthen, defend, and comfort those who stand for you. For you know, O Lord, that I undertake this great cause, not trusting in my own strength, but wholly relying upon you. After long prayer and many anxious petitions, after I had poured out my heart before the Lord and sought his help with earnest groaning, it pleased him recently, in the stillness of the night, to grant me consolation in a dream. I learned anew that he is the one who stills the storm, who turns mourning into joy, and who truly draws near to all who call upon him. It seemed to me that in broad daylight I was lifted high above the earth and carried upward, moving fearlessly from east to west. Then Pelagius approached from the opposite direction. Seizing my left hand, he gripped it firmly. With all his strength, sought to drag me down to the ground. At first I resisted him, relying upon my own strength. The struggle was fierce, prolonged, and full of anxiety. Yet as the contest continued, Pelagius gained the advantage and steadily pulled me downward. Seeing myself nearly overcome, I felt despair rising within me. Then, abandoning confidence in myself, I cried out from my heart for divine assistance. Immediately his grip was broken. Pelagius himself was hurled headlong to the ground. He fell with his neck broken and lay there lifeless, his eyes closed in death. Meanwhile, I remained aloft. Continuing my course as before, I advanced with wonder and joy as though in triumph. From this vision I drew courage and hope. I became convinced that Christ would overcome the proud Pelagius, the leader and representative of the Pelagian cause, and with him the entire army that follows his errors. Yet the victory would not be mine. It would be the victory of divine grace working in me. My task would simply be to labor faithfully according to the strength God supplies. For this cause is not my own, nor is this war mine to wage. The cause belongs to God, the Lord of wisdom, power, and heavenly host, whose servant I am. Why then should I fear the faces of men, their insults, their rage, or their threats, when I stand under the protection of so mighty a defender? Therefore let everyone who belongs to the Lord join with me, or rather let us all join ourselves to the Lord. If we stand with him, who can prevail against us? For I know that one person sustained by God can put 1,000 enemies to flight, and that countless adversaries scatter before the power of his presence. Moreover, just as the ancient Pelagians, puffed up by their reputation for worldly learning, despised the judgment of theology, and demanded that their case be heard before the tribunal of philosophy, so their modern descendants do the same. I have heard defenders of Pelagius, even men of considerable standing in sacred affairs, argue that Pelagius was never truly refuted by philosophical or natural reasoning. They claim that he was condemned chiefly by appeals to theological authorities and by the authority of the church itself, arguments which carried little weight with those who admired him. For that reason, I resolved to confront them on their own ground. I determined to answer them with philosophical arguments as well as theological ones. Furthermore, since both the ancient and modern Pelagians continually distort the meaning of Holy Scripture and the writings of the Catholic Fathers in support of their errors, I judged it necessary to expound the true and solid meaning of those authorities with greater clarity. And because the enemies of grace appear in overwhelming numbers and seek to rob God of what properly belongs to him, I resolved to gather around me a great cloud of witnesses on God's behalf. Otherwise, I might appear to stand alone against such a multitude, especially in a matter so difficult and profound. For who has ever overthrown such an error with only a few words? The Holy Fathers devoted entire libraries to cutting down the vast forest of Pelagian heresy. Yet from those ancient roots, new poisonous shoots continue to spring up in abundance. The disease remains the same, though it appears in new forms. Indeed, the story stretches back to the beginning. After Lucifer, the first great rebel, sought equality with God rather than submission to him and was cast down by Michael. Cain arose. Cain effectively taught that sinners are not justified by God's freely bestowed grace, but rather through merits that precede divine favor. When divine judgment overthrew the spirit of pride, it appeared again in Nimrod. According to Josephus, Nimrod persuaded men not to attribute their prosperity or deliverance to God, but to their own strength and ability. He taught them to place their confidence in themselves rather than in God. Thus, the ancient error has always been the same: human beings refusing to receive all things from God and instead claiming for themselves the glory that belongs to divine grace alone. The majority readily submitted themselves to Nimrod's teaching. They came to regard obedience to God as an oppressive form of slavery. Thus he led men away from the fear of God, filling them instead with pride, contempt for their Creator, and a spirit of tyranny. Although the patriarch Abraham resisted and humbled this impious presumption, the same arrogant spirit soon reappeared among those who boasted that their speech and abilities belonged entirely to themselves. They imagined that their words were their own possession, and therefore despised acknowledging God as their Lord and Master. The same error later appeared among the Sadducees. According to Josephus, they maintained that good and evil are set before men as alternatives, and that each person chooses one or the other by the power of his own will, independently of God's operation. Though this error was reproved by the prophets, it resurfaced among certain Christians, whether among the Hebrews, Greeks, or Romans, who claimed that the grace of faith was bestowed upon them because of their own preceding merits. The apostle decisively refuted such teaching, yet afterward Pelagius the Briton arose and launched an audacious assault against the grace of God and the necessity of divine assistance. The Catholic Fathers condemned his doctrine, but Julian and Cælestius revived it. The Orthodox teachers of the Church suppressed it once more, only for it to be renewed again through Cassian, against whom Prosper vigorously contended. At that same period, the infection spread widely throughout Britain, as the Venerable Bede records in his Ecclesiastical History, and as Henry of Huntingdon likewise relates. The bishops of Germanus of Auxerre and Lupus of Troyes crossed the sea to combat this error, even when violent storms threatened them during their voyage. They pressed on courageously. They oppressed the heresy not merely through argument and preaching, but also through remarkable miracles that openly confirmed the truth. Yet before long, the poisonous growth sprang up again. The same chroniclers tell us that Germanus returned to Britain, accompanied by Severus of Trier, and once again labored to suppress the error. Likewise, the Roman Church repeatedly sought to cleanse Scotland of the remnants of this plague through pastoral admonitions and corrective letters, as Bede testifies. Prosper also bears witness to these efforts, and yet this foolish fig tree, though repeatedly cut down, uprooted, burned, reduced to ashes, and trampled underfoot, continues to send forth new shoots. Indeed, it seems to flourish all the more vigorously, spreading its offspring with greater subtlety, and therefore with greater danger than before. For this reason, being consumed with zeal for the cause of God, I willingly undertake a task that I know will expose me to hostility. I am not unaware that the defenders of Pelagius will raise a great outcry against this work, With sharpened tongues and bared teeth, they will seek to tear these pages apart. Such men are often more eager to destroy what others have built than to construct anything of their own. Yet should this surprise me? Did not the Chaldeans and Mesopotamians oppose Abraham for this very reason? Did not the true prophets continually suffer opposition from false prophets while defending the cause of God? Were there not those who accused the Apostle Paul of madness and sought to discredit his inspired writings? Did not Julian, the disciple of Pelagius, heap accusation upon accusation against the glorious Augustine, the faithful imitator of the apostle and the church's great defender of grace? Did he not boast that he would expose Augustine's errors and overthrow his teaching? And after Augustine's death, did not others continue to attack his writings? Indeed, throughout history, many have slandered the holy doctrine of Christ and of the fathers, opposing by both word and deed the truth that they proclaimed. And who am I in comparison? I know very well that I am neither better than the great saints who have gone before me, nor greater than my Lord himself. Nevertheless, I sincerely desire correction whenever I am in error. I welcome the rebuke of a righteous critic. What I do not desire is the oil of the sinner, flattery masquerading as correction, or criticism that attacks persons rather than truth. Let vice be condemned, not the individual. Let error be opposed, not the man himself. This before God is both my desire and my purpose, both toward myself and toward others. Whoever wishes to treat this single controversy thoroughly must eventually descend into the deepest question of all, the power and operation of causes in general. Yet when I consider my own ability, I am greatly intimidated. The subject rises before me with inaccessible height, unfathomable depth, immeasurable breadth, and seemingly inextricable complexity. Have not the philosophers themselves regarded the investigation of causes as among the hardest of all human pursuits, and therefore as a task fit only for the wise? Hence the poet rightly said, "Blessed is the man who has been able to know the cause or the causes of things." To discover the natural causes of created things and their proximate explanations already demands great labor. How much harder is it to rise above the entire order of created causes, to overcome the dullness imposed by our bodily condition, and to penetrate to the supernatural, invisible, highest, and seemingly inaccessible causes themselves. And harder still is the task of contemplating them clearly, and then helping others to lift their eyes toward the same vision. For this inquiry embraces nothing less than the whole order of causes: the first cause, the creation, preservation, and operation of all things, the power, knowledge, and will of God, foreknowledge, providence, predestination, election, reprobation, and grace, fate, chance, and fortune, free will, merit, and sin, and whether future events are necessary or contingent. From these arise countless further questions, each connected with the rest. In truth, this single investigation touches the whole range of logic, natural philosophy, astronomy, ethics, metaphysics, and sacred theology. It is perhaps the most disputed question among all peoples, language, ranks, sexes, and conditions of life. No one seems willing to remain silent about it, not the learned, nor the unlearned, nor even the most ignorant. Consider how cautiously even the great philosophers, and I just want to go back there. As I mentioned, I paraphrased here. The actual wording that Thomas Bradwardine uses, he says, even the donkey, the sharp division, neither the ignorant man nor even the donkey refrains. So I changed that to ignorance, just soften a little bit, but that is one example of where paraphrase, you get the point of what he's trying to say. Consider how cautiously even the greatest philosophers approach these matters as though they scarcely dared to cross the threshold. It is as if wisdom herself says to the eager student, "You ask me about a subject so vast that even the most diligent labor can scarcely exhaust it. Did not the prophets themselves, though granted profound insight into divine mysteries, speak with trembling wonder? Did not Job, who had no equal on earth, confess his perplexity concerning providence and cry out in astonishment, 'Why do the wicked live, grow old, and increase in power?' Did not David, a man after God's own heart, nearly stumble when he saw the prosperity of sinners? He concluded for a moment that he had purified his heart in vain until he entered the sanctuary of God and received understanding. Did not Solomon, surpassing all men in wisdom, lament that the same events often befall both righteous and wicked alike? He confessed that even the wise cannot fully comprehend the works of God. Did not Jeremiah ask, 'Righteous are you, O Lord, yet I would plead my case before you. Why does the way of the wicked prosper?' And did not the apostles themselves marvel at the same mysteries? Above all, the great apostle Paul, called up into the third heaven and entrusted with divine mysteries, was finally overwhelmed by the depth he contemplated and exclaimed, "Oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom of the knowledge of God! How unsearchable are his judgments and how inscrutable his ways." Peter likewise acknowledged that Paul's letters contain things difficult to understand, and where are those difficulties found most profoundly, if not in these very matters? How many famous schools, philosophers, and theologians across the ages have labored to unravel this vast labyrinth? They have accomplished much, yet they have left much more for those who follow them. This inquiry is like the infinite chaos of Anaxagoras, the labyrinth of Daedalus, and the many-headed Hydra. Indeed, it is more formidable than the Hydra itself. When one of the Hydra's heads was cut off, three arose in its place. But in these questions, whenever one doubt is resolved, countless new doubts spring forth. Who could hope to set forth all these winding complexities in a small book? Here lie the dangers that have shipwrecked many wise men. To avoid one error, they have fallen into another. Seeking to escape Scylla, they have been swallowed by Charybdis. Seeking to avoid Charybdis, they have been torn by Scylla. Who can safely steer the middle course? As for me, I know where I must take refuge, in that ship which cannot perish, the ship of Peter. And again, I've softened that up quite a bit. He actually says this, in the Roman Church, the authority and magisterium of all Christian doctrine. So he is, again, in his context, Roman Catholic. But the ship of Peter, there Christ himself, basically, though, you want to take that to be truth is found in the church, is what he's saying. There Christ himself is the true master and teacher. Therefore I submit myself in all my writings, present and future, to the judgment of the church, seeking her protection when I contend for God's truth, her correction if I err, and her approval where I have spoken rightly. And against all these difficulties I am strengthened by the Lord, for whom nothing is impossible. I know, O God, that you do not abandon those who trust in you. You sustain, teach, defend, strengthen, and establish them. Therefore, relying upon your grace, I will continue to fight beneath your unconquered banner and to plead your cause without ceasing. And then that's the end of it here. He's going to get into the first chapter of the first book there. And hopefully, we can get that translated and we'll get started on that. But if you're interested in this kind of stuff, thanks for watching and leave me a comment below.